We are Portland at the Movies. We are a podcast that takes a look at movies that were filmed in and around Portland or within today's drive or so, in case you want to go visit that location. And we have got a doozy for you that we discovered just last week. So, are we ready to get started? Yeah! All right. From the director of Top Dog, Delta Force 2, and Sidekicks, and the writer whose honest-to-God name is Ron Swanson. We watched Forest Warrior, so that means it's time for another episode of Portland at the Movies.
In a world built in a land of eternal beauty, all that stands between a city and a disaster is a city where anything can happen. If you thought you had seen it all.
I saved the forest from your carelessness. Now I'll save it from your greed.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Portland at the Movies. I am one of your hosts, Todd Wergoven, and with me, as always, is Mark Middleton. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing really well, Todd.
Good, and of course, we are joined with Brian, the Unipiper Kid. How are you, Brian?
Unipiper where?
The Unipiper where? He's right here in front of us.
Yeah.
Unmasked for once, for this special occasion. We originally had planned a movie that Sarah X. Dillon may or may not have appeared in. We still don't know. But instead, we bumped it for one man, and that one man is Chuck Norris. So, Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about Forest Warrior?
So, Forest Warrior stars Chuck Norris and a group of children. They team up on Mount Hood to protect an enchanted forest from the evil lumberjacks. But Chuck Norris has been dead for more than 100 years and now is a spirit-possessed shapeshifter who can transform into a bear, a wolf, or an eagle.
All of that happens.
That's the whole movie.
In this movie.
I actually made a list of everything that Chuck Norris does in this movie. So in lieu of just watching the movie, I can just read this list to bring everybody up.
One of those things will not be emote, because that didn't happen in the entire movie.
Okay, so bear with me here. We have a drop and roll to dodge a bullet.
Right.
And this is before he gains superpowers. He runs for 40 miles after killing his horse.
Yes, the story, the movie opens with it being told that the lore of Chuck Norris's character, who was named McKenna?
Jedediah.
Jedediah McKenna.
Jedediah McKenna, who lived long ago in the 1700s and ended up being killed and then resurrected. So at the beginning of the movie, we see a flashback to Chuck Norris's character being alive in the 1700s or something like that.
1875. But that's close.
It's close enough.
Only 100 years.
Give or take a century.
Everything over 50 years is just previous. So he breaks a rifle with his bare hands. No pun intended. He also breaks another rifle by throwing it at a tree.
And then the gun explodes.
And the gun explodes, right, of course. He picks up a wild raccoon for no reason.
He does.
He uses psychic powers to read another man's memories.
He does.
He stares into his soul.
He stares into his soul, yeah.
Also known as Forest Jesus, he brings a girl back to life.
He does do that as well.
This is all in Oregon. This is our state, you guys.
Has anybody seen this movie?
No.
Yeah.
You do yourself a favor. The entire thing is free on YouTube. The first thing you should do when you get home is watch Forest, and then watch it for the rest of your life, because it is amazing.
And then go find a copy of VHS, because this is the original format. It was direct-to-video. You have to own this.
So as I mentioned, this was directed by the guy who did Top Dog and Delta Force 2 and a bunch of other Chuck Norris's movie. Coincidentally, he is Chuck Norris's brother.
Yes.
And so the writer...
Ron Swanson is Chuck Norris's brother.
Ron Swanson, he's the writer who also did like 2 other movies, one of them being Top Dog and like 2 of them being episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger. So this is the Top Dog came out 2 years before this and was his last movie to come out in theaters. This was direct to VHS.
So this is what he tried to resurrect his career with after being kicked out of theaters?
Yes, when we no longer welcomed into the theater, he tried to force himself into our homes. So for the first, you said that Chuck Norris does a lot of things in this movie, but he also does nothing for almost, we get, the first 5 minutes is slow motion Chuck Norris running through the forest over a crazy amount of credits. But then the rest of the movie, during the fight scenes, during everything, Chuck Norris stands all but immobile, and unless somebody gets within the range of his kick, he just stands there.
Chuck Norris doesn't need to fight anyone.
So there is a main bad guy. The gist of this story is that it flashes back to a group of kids in current time, which was 1996 back then, who have this treehouse in the forest. They like to hang out there, but there's an evil logging company who's Mark. Why don't you tell us who the main bad guy is there?
The main bad guy also was Bernie in Weekend at Bernie's.
He is Terry Kaiser from Weekend at Bernie's.
Yep.
And you'll quickly realize why he didn't talk in Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes, and his character is a very. This whole movie is crazy. Yes.
So what are some of the movies that this movie took inspiration from, Todd?
Well, there's the Goonies aspect, because there's a group of kids that are trying to get their land back from evil developers, in this case, deforesters. So there's the evil logging company headed by Terry Kaiser.
Okay, so part Goonies.
Part Goonies, yes.
By the end of the movie, what does it turn into?
Well, it turns into... In case we weren't clear, Chuck Norris is a shapeshifter in this movie, and he anamorphs into a bear at one point.
A bear that talks.
He does.
But not only a bear, it's also an eagle, an owl, a bobcat, and a wolf. So it's kind of like Voltron. Those animals come together to form Chuck Norris.
They do. So there'll be the evil loggers threatening the kids, and all of a sudden you'll see a third of this movie is stock footage of animals. So there's
I think there's 5 minutes straight of a bear catching a butterfly. I'm not exaggerating.
Just correct.
And so you'll see the eagle flying through the air, and then the eagle will turn into a kick that is Chuck Norris's foot flying out.
Swoops in and nails it.
And he appears.
I'd like to remind everyone this all takes place on Mount Hood.
So Loretta Swit is also in this movie.
Hot Lips Houlihan.
Hot Lips Houlihan. And it is so regretful that we don't have a picture of this, because she is wearing a haircut that is a crime against humanity. It looks like someone put a bowl on her head, like Dumb and Dumber style, and just cut around the edges. And whoever was in charge of that, that poor woman. I mean, they had her on screen a lot. Can anyone see that at all? I mean, it is a tragedy. But anyway, she's in the movie for like 5 minutes, so it doesn't really matter.
And then at the end of the movie, it just full-on devolves into a knockoff of Home Alone.
It does. It's very slapsticky, and of course, Weekend at Bernie's guy is very... He is trying so hard in this movie, because he's the exact same type of humor as Weekend at Bernie's. He's falling down things, he's dragged down a cliff at some point, and he is mugging and making faces, and he gets poison ivy at one point, and acting against Chuck Norris, who may as well be made out of balsa wood. He is so uninteresting.
There was a description in the movie about his fighting style. Do you have that?
Yes, I have the quote. So
as this legend of the story of McKenna is being told, his fighting style is actually described by our ancient wise sage storyteller.
And what does he say? He fought the way of the Indian, lunging, spinning, grappling, and twirling.
That is exactly what I think when I think of the Indian fighting styles.
Grappling and twirling is not a fight style, let alone the Native American fighting style. Grappling, which was like Kodos and Kang. Twirling.
Maybe you're not fighting right.
Chuck Norris is a shapeshifter in this movie. Are we going there?
I'm sorry, I keep going back to it.
We left out the most important thing that Chuck Norris does in this movie, and if anybody in this room has heard of this movie, it's through this one scene. This is one I wish we had video again. But Chuck Norris stops a chainsaw with his bare hands. And when I say bear, I mean human bear, not bear.
He's a bear. Because he is a bear in this movie.
He grabs the blade of a chainsaw and stops it.
As it's cutting down a tree.
But he was a hawk first. He saw the chainsaw as a hawk. He turns into he doesn't swoop in right to the chainsaw. He chooses to swoop in about a mile away, then turns into a wolf, and then runs the last mile in. And then he's Chuck Norris with his bare hand. It is, you have, just Google it. Right now, if I see your phone out,
We will wait.
I will allow it.
Chuck Norris chainsaw gif, and it will be wonderful.
So 1996 is when this movie was made.
1996.
You know how I knew that? It had every checkbox marked on the 90s movie checklist.
Oh, nice.
There was a group of ragtag kids. Someone gets sprayed by a skunk.
Yes.
And there's more than one nut shots.
No, there are several. And this movie is, you can't really tell by the giant poster, but this is a children's movie. They kind of hide the children at the bottom.
That's true.
And it's very, I feel like Chuck Norris, all of his stuff, he has to be so straight and clean and scrubbed and can't have any faults or anything like that. And that whole movie is this. It's just him standing there being completely uninteresting against the people around him. And I think the movie really suffers from that. We started reading over here.
We're talking
We
about
found
that
the
show over
script, and we're just reading the script now since we don't have the kids.
Geeking out on the script by Ron Swanson. I want to see what else that guy's done.
The guys, there's also a bear cub in this movie that befriends the group of children in their treehouse. And the bear, every time it did something, it was either laughing or the bear was laughing and grunting and making all these noises. And I looked up the guy who was credited as the bear, and that guy has been in everything. That guy has done voices for World of Warcraft, Resident Evil, Diablo, Call of Duty, Street Fighter, like every single game that's ever been out since the 90s, he has been a voice
So
actor.
he's the grunt guy?
He's the grunting little bear from Forest. As we all remember, he's the grunting forest bear from
Whenever you're
Forest Warrior.
a grunt in a video game, it's that guy.
He's the actual grunt, yes.
Would you say that there's a moral to the movie, to the story? Like what is it trying to teach you?
What did we learn?
Well, it's obviously, the whole gist is them trying to stop the forest from being cut down by these angry loggers, and so there's this weird environmental message, and there's also this, I want to say anti-gun, but it is completely not, or anti-violence, but it is...
It's essentially Captain Planet, the movie.
It really is.
The live-action Captain Planet movie, because the kids, their power of love, heart, water, air, earth comes together and creates Chuck Norris.
That's true. So at one point, when he's flying out of the air after being an eagle, he transforms back into Chuck Norris, and I totally forgot where I was going with that. I was distracted by him dressed in his pelt on the back of his Forest Warrior box.
The bad guys call him a 70s evil hippie guy.
Yeah, they do, and his outfit never gets... He's been living in the forest for 100 years, and there's not a stain on that pelt that he's wearing.
He's enchanted.
He is enchanted.
So one of the things we do on this podcast is pay special attention to the specific locations where this movie was filmed. Were there any that stood out in this film?
Actually, I thought Oregon looked really pretty in this. They did some in Hood River, in Lost Lake, which is northeast of Mount Hood, and a place called Parkdale, which is halfway in between like Hood River and Mount Hood. And actually, the only thing that came out looking good in this movie, I think, was the Oregon scenery.
It was gorgeous, yeah.
Yeah, what great cinematography.
For a Chuck Norris movie.
The one place I want to go, so the center of town, there's a little country store. It's where everyone seems to gather, and it's where the kids leave on their journey up the mountain from. But it's actually a real store in Hood River. It's still open, called the Apple Valley Country Store.
Oh, nice.
Anyone here heard of that or been there? Yeah, a couple of people.
Well, that's where this was filmed.
Seen.
As seen in Forest Warrior.
Did you guys know you were in Portland movie history right there?
So we did mention at one point the main girl that is in this. We think at one point she's been killed in an explosion, or which I guess she had because Chuck Norris brings her back to life with the spirit of the forest, right?
Yeah, she's truly dead.
And so my question is, it's the same thing that happened to Chuck Norris. He died and he was inhabited by the spirit of the forest. So is that little girl now an ever-living forest zombie that has to spend eternity with Chuck Norris?
That's a good question.
That is harrowing.
I had that same question. Does she get the morphine powers?
Oh, maybe. Maybe she's a different set of animals.
Maybe there will be a sequel.
it was a backdoor pilot.
They were hoping for the franchise.
Yeah. The cinematic universe, Forest Warrior. All Chuck Norris movies are connected. I'm sure that someone has thought of that on Reddit.
So, almost done. There's so much to talk about in this movie. At one point, the ragtag group of kids are sabotaging the vehicles of the loggers that are trying to cut down the forest. And there's a scene where they steal one of the walkie-talkies so they can communicate Die Hard style with the loggers. And one of the little kids starts playing this terrible knockoff summer song that they obviously didn't want to pay rights for real song.
Summertime.
Yeah, and so
Summertime.
He's playing this over the walkie-talkie, and all of the loggers hear this.
So it was a plan. So the loggers were going to cut down the trees, and this was their idea to get them to stop cutting down the trees. If we play music, the loggers must stop what they're doing and dance.
And it worked!
And that's exactly what they did.
That's exactly what happened.
With their chainsaws.
Air guitar with chainsaw.
They are standing on their equipment, they are dancing, they are...
One guy's doing the King Tut
Crazy.
in the middle of the woods.
So I was busy writing down my astonishment at that scene, and that is immediately followed by him stopping a chainsaw with his bare hands. And then that final scene of him morphing into an actual bear that talks. That's how this movie ends, is he morphs into a talking bear.
And his voice drops like an octave. It's Chuck Norris, like his voice doesn't need to drop an octave, but it does.
Oh, well, no, I guess that's not exactly how it all the way ends. It ends with him finding his lost love, which is the Native American woman that he originally married in the 1800s or whenever he lived. She appears as out of nowhere and walks off to him with him in the distance.
So if he's supposed to be the spirit protector of the forest, why does that role get to go to the white man, and why can't it be the Native American?
He was donated the land when he was married, he said, and so Chuck Norris is protecting the Native American land on their behalf, I guess, as the noble white man can. So anyway, we are almost out of time.
Yeah, I think
else you guys want to add?
I really want to do this, Todd. When I saw it in the movie, I knew exactly this had to happen. So the group of kids in the movie, they call themselves the Lords of Tanglewood. Tanglewood was the made-up fictional town where this movie takes place. And kind of like the Goonies never say die, well, the Lords of Tanglewood say something too. And they say it all together. So I want to get everyone in the audience here. I'm going to teach you. You're all going to be Lords of Tanglewood by the end of this podcast. So... I'm going to say this a couple times.
If you were worried you wouldn't have to say an oath before you went home, we're saying an oath.
We're here to save the forest.
So listen, internalize, and then we're going to say it all together 3 times in a row, because that's what they do. Okay, so we ask you to leave it pure as found. We are to it forever bound. All right, again, we ask you to leave it pure as found. We are to it forever bound.
One more time.
One more time? Okay. We ask you to leave it pure as found. We are to it forever bound. Everybody now. We ask you to leave it pure as found. We are to it forever bound. We ask you to leave it. We can do this for 20 minutes and just call it the Forest Warrior
I think we
podcast.
actually got stuck in a loop there. It was like an echo chamber. Well, that does it for this episode. Sadly shortened. We'll have to revisit this at some point because there's so much more to talk about. Like I said, it is free on YouTube, so go watch it. It's amazing. Mark, where else can we hear you?
You can hear us at portlandofthemovies.com, and Todd and I are in a podcast that the Unipiper visits each week called the Mark and Toddcast. But you can listen to us on the Funemployment Radio Network.
Yes, and Brian, if people want to find out more about the Unipiper, what can they do?
They can point their web browsers over to unipiper.com, and be sure to check out the Unipiper store. And I've also got Unipiper merchandise in the merch table tonight, so come and buy my stuff for Shameless Club.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you for the people who put this on. It's been amazing. It's been fun. Thank you so much.